Of the week. Let's turn it over to Martin Anderson Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and maintainer of a number of modules, a growing number of modules of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. This week, I thought we would talk about a brand new module, ECA Commerce, which provides events to the ECA module from all of the Commerce Core and submodules. It's a module that was actually created in just the last couple of weeks. It has currently a 1.0.0 Alpha 2 version, which works with Drupal 9 and 10. It was recently released by someone who will be familiar to listeners of this podcast, our own Nick Laughlin, along with Jurgen Haas as a co maintainer. It currently has one site in use of the module, according to Drupal.org, and has currently one open issue with no bugs. Now, the way that the module works for listeners may recall the in-depth discussion we had about ECA from episode 402. Really, this module adds events for working with Drupal Commerce. So whenever someone on the site updates a product, inserts a product variation, creates a promotion, deletes a store, pays an order, a variety of other different kinds of things they might be doing on a Drupal site. Now you can also make those part of an ECA workflow to sort of, trigger emails or show different messages. Lots of different ways that could be useful in terms of making the site more interactive. So having these events available within ECA means that you really have that sort of the power of ECA, and in particular, sort of the I would say visually customizing in the sense of like using a visual tool, that BPMN tool, to really build out some very custom functionality without having to write any custom code. Nick, why don't you tell us about what inspired you to create this module and what's been your experience in creating it?
Yeah, so let's start with the second question, the experience creating it. It was actually pretty cool. So when Jurgen was on the show, he mentioned that he does the weekly live coding sessions on Fridays. And so I saw a need for this module and thought I'd join it. And we spent about an hour and 10 minutes running through kind of the scaffolding of the module. It showed me kind of a couple of examples of how you set up the some details for the module, and I'll talk about those when I get to the features. But that was extremely helpful, and that really got me started. I was able to write the majority of the module in one morning, and then I spent another morning writing kind of the second half of it, I suppose you'd say. And he's been really responsive to any questions that I have in the ECA channel. But yeah, it was actually, there was a lot to do because commerce is a huge ecosystem of modules, and I have some ideas for things that can go in the future. But the experience of writing it was pretty great. As for the inspiration, I have a e-commerce client that I'm working for right now that needs, one of the great things about Drupal and Commerce had always been the rules module, the ability to set up notifications or tweak things. And I know rules is technically available for 9 and 10, but it never quite felt like it made the port or made the jump to the full functionality that it had in 7. And there are a couple of things that I need to do with this project that are going to require some custom coding. So particularly, I need to prevent certain rules from applying coupons or discounts, and I need to be able to change pricing for certain roles. And of course, I could write some custom code for that, and I may still need to. But I thought, if I can expose all that stuff through ACA, through a custom module, that will help ECA adoption, help other people. And it seems like a useful module. And since we just had Jurgen on the show and he mentioned that he'd be willing to help out with that kind of stuff, I thought I'd put it to the test. The module kind of does two things right now. One thing is it provides a listener for all the events that commerce it's and all of the core commerce submodules provide. So it provides listeners, you can add those as events in your ECA setup, in your ECA models. And then I also added the reason why there's a point 2 release or an alpha 2, I added all of the different tokens that are available. So for example, if you add a item to your cart, that entity is available to ECA now. One big caveat, there are several entities or several events that have more complex interactions that probably won't work. So for example, with the entity with the cart, like that's pretty simple. Like the cart, like there's a bunch of stuff that's just provided by Drupal and ECA out of the box. I just say this is the entity, this is the name. You can modify it and tweak it with tokens. There's a bunch that have their own setter methods or other methods. I didn't fully implement those, but I figured I would add those as needed. One last thing I'll say is for our listeners out there, if you're looking to integrate with an ecosystem, I think there's a couple of clever things in the module that Jürgen and I came up with to handle those types of situations. So, for example, you need to know, like, I didn't want to create a dependency on every single submodule in Commerce because otherwise, when you if you install this module, it's going to install every Commerce module. You can't do that. But we also need to know that a module is enabled in order to integrate with it, right? So I think there's a pretty clever solution in the module and checking to see which classes are available. And if the submodule event class is available, then we can integrate and listen to those events. What that means is this submodule, as needed, can add support for other contributed commerce. Like we're not going to need an ECA commerce, whatever payment gateway you're using module. We can add that support to this module safely. So I think it's a pretty powerful system. It was a great experience working with Jürgen. I'm sure I'll have additional questions. Hopefully, people will use it, provide some feedback. Once I'm going to be working on the functionality this week for that client, so hopefully it works. If not, I guess I'll still maintain this module and I'll just write that custom code. But once I set that up and confirm that it works, at least for a couple of use cases, I'll do a full release so it gets security coverage. But yeah, overall, it was a great experience.
Yeah, I want to key in on one thing you said there, which is really around sort of you know, Jürgen Haas, but really I feel like the group of people in the ECA community right now and their willingness to sort of jump in and help if you have a question. Anytime I've gone into their Slack channel in Drupal Slack, they've really been amazing in terms of being very responsive.
Yeah, it's been great. I think there was one other person on the call, on the live coding session that we did. And as you mentioned on the show, they're all recorded. So I think he's released this one. So if you're looking to, there were a couple things that he ran into that were, if he had, it wasn't like he just showed me like, here, copy this code and do this. There were a couple things that he ran into that because he had written ECA, he was able to get past pretty quickly. And if I had been trying to do it myself, would have taken probably enough effort that I probably would have just abandoned it and written the custom code. Because writing custom code sometimes is easier, right? But because he was so available, I think this is something that will be much more valuable to the community at large. But yeah, everybody has been super responsive.
Now, Nick, you mentioned that you had some ideas around kind of a future state for the module. Can you give us any insights into some things that might be available down the road?
Yeah, so there's a few things in particular. One is I haven't integrated with any hooks. So Webform is an example of a module that uses hooks more than events. You can create an event around a hook and then expose that to ECA. There's only 2 hooks, I think, in Commerce, and they're around altering certain forms. So I don't think that they're used all that much. So if somebody needs it, they can make a feature request and I'll do it. The other thing is better integration with certain entities. Like I said, Jürgen mentioned that if an event entity has special methods, many times you have to do some magic to make it work better. For the moment, I just expose those. I expect that they won't work the way you would expect them to out of the box. Again, if somebody needs them, we can figure that out and add that support. But probably the biggest thing, and the thing I'll probably do just as I have time, is I'll add support for other e-commerce system, subsystem, contributed modules. Like I'm probably not going to go out and seek them all out, but if somebody needs one, create an issue, and it's pretty straightforward at this point to, if there's an event, I can add that event to the list.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I'm been using Commerce for a long time, and like thinking of like Commerce does have some ability out of the box to do kind of like conditional things with coupons and stuff like that. But like having the ECA kind of the ability to build models and to be able to see them, I think is like a lot easier in most cases for site or store administrators to understand and kind of work with. So I'm interested to dive into that and see more about what you guys did there.
Yep, I'll report back, I guess, once I've actually used the module I wrote.
There you go.
But hopefully it works.
Oh, I'm sure it'll